Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the videos.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Ganesh IAS Academy. So, as a part of the current affairs for this year prelims 2024, so we've been discussing the most probable areas from where questions can be asked. So, as a part of that, done we've already done 3 sessions: one on polity and governance, one on environment and geography, and one on science and technology. So, as a part of that, we'll be dealing with economy today, and we'll have one more session on history, and with that we'll be wrapping up the series. So that's what we thought of doing. So yeah, we'll start with GDP. See, actually, every year, either directly or indirectly, there'll be at least one question from GDP, either the key concept, or whether the concept or the data or some current affair, some growth rate. Somehow directly or indirectly, you will find the term GDP in the question paper. So it's very important that you get to know about GDP. So first, you need to know what GDP is. It's like gross domestic product, and then you need to know what is GNP, and then you need to know what is NDP, net domestic product, and then net national product, and then you need to know about what is national income, what is disposable income. National income, disposable income, personal income. So you just will have to have a quick um, you just need to have a quick revision about the topics that I've written on the board. So apart from that, you need to know about the GDP growth rate. See, generally how UPSC asks question from GDP is, it will give a statement telling that in the last 5 years GDP growth rate has been steadily increasing or steadily decreasing. It will give statements like that. See, usually the point with Indian economy, or any economy, say for that matter, you will not have a steady similar pattern kind of a growth. For instance, say assume that we are in the year 2024. Suppose there's a question on GDP for the last 5 years. You need not know the GDP data for the last 4 or 5 years, but by using common sense, what you can know is, definitely assume this is your 19, this 2020, 21, 22, 23. So excluding 24, say assume that you will have question till 23. So going by logic, your GDP growth rate during your 2019 would have been here, whereas for your 2020 it would have been down because you had COVID year, and then 2021 you would have had resurgence, 2022 again here, 2023. So this is never a steady pattern actually. So I think this was asked in 2020 mains. 2020 mains, there was a question in GS3 talking about what is V-shaped growth, not inverted. What is V-shaped growth? And this question they had picked directly from economic survey. So with that understanding, you need to know, and then you need to know what are the approaches to GDP. So you will have either the production approach, income approach, and the expenditure approach. A production approach is based on the amount of goods that are produced, whereas the income approach depends on the income that your economy is generating, or the expenditure approach where you calculate your GDP based on the amount of expenditure that you make for running or sustaining the economy. So those are the three approaches. Then you need to know what is this central statistical organization, because that's the organization that releases GDP reports. And then you need to know the base year. Base year for GDP is like 2011-12, and like very recently, say in the before 5 or 6 years, it was changed from 2004-5 to 11-12. And like it's very important that periodically you revise the base year. And then you need to know about what is nominal GDP and like real GDP. Your nominal GDP doesn't account for the inflation, whereas your real GDP accounts for the inflation. So the divergence between these two will tell you the intensity of inflation in an economy. Then you need to know about what is this term GDP deflator. You need to know about this term, and then you need to know about what is like base effect. See, base effect is nothing but this happened during the COVID year. Assume in the COVID year you had a GDP growth rate was, assume we're talking about GDP and not GDP growth rate. Assume that your GDP was 200 lakh crore in 2019, whereas in 2020 what would have happened is it would have become 190 lakh crore in 2020. This is 19, this is 20. Whereas in 21, what would have happened is it would have become 195 lakh crore. So if you see between 2019 and 2020, you have a 2.5% decline. Whereas between your 2020 and 2021, you have how much is like 5 lakh of like 190. 5 of 190 is roughly some 25. That's like again somewhere around 2.7, 2.8 growth. So between 2020 and 2021, your economy has grown for 2.8%, but in reality, compared to 2019, it's still less only. So that is the concept of base effect. Your base effect is if the reference that you're taking, if the reference you're taking is so low, even a small increment will sound like a bigger increment. So that is what is the base effect all about. So apart from that, you need to know about terms like incremental capital output ratio. And then very important thing is you should know whether the question asked is about GDP or GDP growth rate. Sometimes they ask questions about GDP, sometimes they ask questions about GDP growth rate, and like both are very very different. So it's like important that you read the question very carefully. Next is like multidimensional poverty index. Multidimensional poverty index. I don't know like how far they have asked in prelims, but in 2021 mains it was asked. Oh, sorry, 2020 mains it was asked. GS2 or GS3, I don't remember, but MDPI was asked. So as far as like multidimensional poverty index is concerned, you need to know what are the indicators, what are the dimensions and the indicators. Your health, education, and standard of living are the dimensions, whereas your undernutrition, child mortality, and maternal health, all these three are the indicators. And your years of schooling and school attendance for education, fuel, sanitation, water, electricity, assets, housing, bank accounts. This bank account has been added very recently. Previously, you did not have this bank account. You had like this 1/6, 1/12, 1/12, and this had 1/6. This had 1/6, and this had 118 previously. Now it is 121. Each of these have 121 weightage, because you have your bank account is something that is like, see, this is like repeated. Your bank account is like something that is added recently, and then like it is published by your UNDP and Oxford Poverty and Development Initiative, and it has said that your MDPI has said that multidimensional poverty index, I mean like 11.23% of the Indian population is multidimensionally poor, which is a significant departure from 55% what was available in 2005 and 6 data. So we have made like a huge progress. So I think that data, so compare this with 2005-6 data. So like this is something important. So apart from that, you need to know about what is HDI, Human Development Index, the indicators, dimensions, and then inequality index, global inequality index, and then what is Gini coefficient, and then you need to know about what is Gini coefficient, Phillips curve, Phillips curve, Laffer curve. So all these terms you need to be aware of. Okay, moving to the next. The next is like state finances. And I think every alternate year you get a question on state finance regarding the debt to GDP ratio, or the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio, or the progress that we've made, or the targets that the encasing committee has set, or the targets that the revised targets for the current year that was like taken up in the budgeting year. So all those things, like directly or indirectly, questions are being asked. So first, what you need to know is you need to know about the debt to GDP ratio of the state and the union government. The data you can like take it from RBI reports, RBI report, or like economic survey. And then the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio for the entire, so for the state, it is like from 4.1% to 2.8% between 2020 and 2021. And then you need to know about the terms, or less like tax buoyancy. That is the tax revenues response to increase in the income of the nation. And then you need to know about the NK committee recommendations, or the parameters that it talks about. NK Singh has talked about fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, debt to GDP ratio, so debt to GDP ratio, and then there's one more term. I think I'm unable to recollect the another term, but you just need to be aware of the other terms. What is primary deficit? I think that is like very important. And then your debt data for like overall the debt data for both union and the state governments put together is like 81%, and for the union government alone it is like 57%. Whereas the target that is set by the encasing committee is like 60% overall, with like 40% for the union government and 20% for the state governments. And then next is like you need to know about the internal debt. I think your debt component consists of like two types. Internal debt and external debt. Your internal debt can be of like two types: marketable and then non-marketable. Whereas your external debt can be from external commercial borrowings, multilateral borrowings, bilateral borrowings, export credit. So this difference you need to like know. So of this, your internal debt component is 94.6% of your total public debt, whereas only the rest 5.4% is from external debt. And you know, like UPSC once in 2019 asked a question on external debt where it said that a majority of the external debt is sovereign debt, which means it said that, say, assume you have like $100 billion of external debt. A majority means more than 50% of the debt is from government, whereas the rest are from the private. That's what the statement said. But the factual data is your private actually has the maximum component of external debt, whereas your sovereign debt is like slightly minimal, slightly lesser only. So that statement was wrong. So this year you can be asked whether your external debt, you can have statements like your external debt has the major component of public debt in India. No, it's your internal debt that is a major component. And then we need to know about the distribution of uh, external debt and in what currencies those debts are maintained. I think the question that I spoke to you just now, there was a second statement to that. It said that every component of external debt is in US dollars only, which is like, see, this is a very extreme statement, which is more likely to be wrong. But at the same time, if you see it logically, also, India might not borrow from just one country, and that too, even if it borrows from a lot of countries, it need not like borrow in a single currency. It actually India tries to diversify the uh, like debt components as well as the currencies in which it borrows. So, like going by logic, the statement was supposed to be wrong. So that's it with the thing, and then you need to know about the component of public debt, and then you need to know what are off-budget borrowings. Your off-budget borrowings are they're not reflecting in your like budget, but you are allowed to like borrow to meet your expenditure needs. So that's your off-budget borrowings. So all these things you need to be aware. Moving next is like current account deficit. I think in your external sector, you have like two different accounts. You have a current account and then you have a capital account. And in current account, you have visibles and invisibles. And invisibles, you have services, incomes, and transfer payments. And then in your capital account, you have FDI, FPI, other offshore funds, and then depository receipts. You have like such a kind of distribution. I think you just need to like brush up that part. And then first you need to know about what is balance of payment. And then you need to know the difference between your current account and your capital account. And then you need to know about the trade deficit nations and then the trade surplus nations, which like we'll discuss. There's one more like current affair this coming up. We'll discuss that there. And then you have to know about the effect of current account deficit on the economy. See, if you have more current account deficit means, which means what? You're in demand for dollar. You are in demand for dollar because whatever you're importing is very high when compared to the components that you are exporting. So naturally, to pay for the imports, you need more dollars. So if you have demand for more dollars, naturally, what will happen? Your rupee will depreciate. If your rupee depreciates, then what will happen? Your imports become costly, and your exports might be promoted. But for Indian context, since you export less than what you import, it's going to be only negative for India, for Indian economy. So that aspect. So if there is like large current account deficit, then it's going to depreciate your rupee. It's going to increase your inflation. It's going to affect your competitiveness of your product. You might be like subjected to your competitiveness of your domestic products because your imports. Sorry, not domestic products. Since your like imports are costly and your exports are cheap, exports may be promoted. Your goods and service availability within the country might be affected because since you're gaining more by exporting. So all those aspects you need to cover. And then what are dated securities? I think this question of securities, government securities, treasury bills, state development loans, cash management bills. I think every year at least you will get at least one question or one statement. So like you need to know what these are. So your government securities are securities that are issued by your center and state, and it is issued by your government of India or the government of state, and it's done by RBI on behalf of the governments. And then the tenor for them is like 5 years to 40 years. And then your data securities have like interest rates. They might have either fixed interest rates or floating interest rate. A fixed interest rate is like irrespective of the inflation or the number of years that it passes, it has a similar interest rate. Whereas your floating interest rate, it gets adjusted as per the inflation that's happening, and it takes into account the other changes in the economy as well. So you need to know the difference between a fixed and floating interest rate. And then these are like risk-free and gilt-edged instruments. Your gilt-edged instruments means they have like very little or no risks associated with them because these are government securities, and anyway your government is going to get it back from you. So these are like risk-free or gilt-edged instruments. I think it's important to know these terms. And then you need to know about treasury bills. They are issued at discount and redeemed at par. The treasury bills generally have maturity of like 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. And what is this issued at discount and redeemed at par? It means that Assume that you have a T bill which costs rupees 100. So the government will not sell it at 100 rupees, whereas it will sell it at rupees 94, which means it is issuing it at discount. Okay. Now when, so this is like government and this is people. When the government takes it back, it will pay 100 rupees and then get back the bill. So the 6 rupees what the government is paying is the profit for the buyer of the T bill. So your treasury bill is issued at discount and it is redeemed at par. So that's what this means. And then you need to know about like cash management bills. A cash management bill is nothing but a T bill, but it has maturity less than 91 days. And then you have state development loans. State development loans are financial instruments that are used by the state governments to mobilize funds for their developmental needs. So like all these are with respect to dated securities. And then you need to know something about bond market. What is a bond yield? What are returns? So all these you must know. Moving next. Okay, this is a goods and service tax. This is there in current affairs for the last like maybe 7 or 8 years, 7 years at least since 2017. Like it's 7 years. So GST is a multi-stage destination-based tax. It was introduced as a part of like 101st Amendment. You can expect a question on GST Council. So it was incorporated under Article 278. Who are the members? Your GST Council has your Union Finance Minister as the chairperson, and you have the Minister of State for Finance, and then you have your state finance ministers, and your voting share is your center has 33% vote share, and your state has 67% vote share. And then for any resolution to be passed, you need at least 75% vote, which means your union government has a virtual veto in the GST Council. So this is like one of the reasons why like several southern states or like some state governments are like demanding for population based or revenue based vote sharing, so that the states that contribute more can have more say in the decisions of the GST Council. And then this production GST, this was asked in 2018. There was a very, actually, to be frank, that was a flimsy question. I do not know what is UPSC going to do by asking you the products in the GST slab, so that you can like maybe overlook for this year. It's like less likely to be asked again. But you have to know about what is this GST appellate tribunal. This was in like news recently. So I think if you like know that, it's like fine enough for this topic. Next is your gig economy. I think on gig economy we have had like one or two mains questions that were asked, but like it's important that you like read from Prelims perspective also. You need to know what a gig worker is, and to know what is a platform worker and a non-platform worker. See, basically, your gig economy is a kind of economy where there is like quite different from the traditional employee-employer relationship, where the employer is not obliged to give a guaranteed like job or an employment to the employer. So it's not based on a long-term contract. It's a very short-term contract. So a gig worker is the one who becomes a part of the gig economy, who gets into short-term relationships with the employer. And then you need to know about the platform and a non-platform worker. A platform worker is someone who is like connected, is a gig worker who is connected through social media or the mobile apps. For instance, your Ola, Uber drivers, your Zomato, Swiggy, all those come under platform workers. Whereas your non-platform worker is the one who is not connected through that. Your housekeeping, all those comes under a non-platform worker. And then your code on wages and your code on security, they both talk about the code on wages and code on security. They both talk about gig workers. It defines who a gig worker is. Your code on social security defines who a gig worker is. So you just go through that definition, and then it also talks about who is a platform worker and who is an unorganized worker. I think yeah, like this is something that will do. It's just like liquidity management, and this is something a part of like very basic, very basics of like economy. It's important that you know, because all these terms are like repeatedly in news. The two like repo and reverse repo, every year you will find it in news, and at least one question will come from this liquidity management. Like what will happen when the country is in recession? What will happen to the repo rate or reverse repo rate? Or when the country is in boom, what will happen to the repo rate or reverse repo rate? What is cash reserve ratio? What is statutory liquid ratio? This is like the proportion of deposits that the banks have with the RBI, whereas your statutory liquidity ratio is something the proportion of deposits that the banks have with themselves. And you have to know the components of statutory liquid ratio. You have it in gold, you have it in government securities, you have it in money, that is SLR, and then you have your repo and reverse repo rate. The repo and reverse repo rate is, assume this is your like RBI and this is your bank one, two, three. When RBI gives money to the banks, the interest rate that it charges is your repo rate, whereas your reverse repo rate is when your banks lend money to RBI, the interest that it receives from RBI is your reverse repo rate. Generally, your repo is greater than your reverse repo. And then you need to know about the standing deposit facility, which is an extraordinary instrument that is used to maintain the liquidity in the banks. And then you need to know about open market operations, where your government sells and buys bonds or securities to maintain liquidity in the economy. And then ways and means advances are like extraordinary like tools that help the government to maintain like liquidity. So it's like usually done with the help of RBI. Apart from this, you need to know what sterilization is. Sterilization was asked one year. Sterilization was asked 1 year in prelims. You need to know what sterilization is. Sterilization is like something whenever you have like too much dollar inflow. At that time, what you will do is dollar inflow or money inflow. You will just segregate that money separately, and then you will issue bonds for them, and then you will like periodically release this money into the economy instead of like a single bunch of money being released into the economy. You just hold it in reserve, and then you just release it like slowly, so that your economy is like protected from the liquidity shocks. So that's sterilization. And then you need to read about institutions. See, as far as like all the economic related institutions are concerned, you need to like work along these aspects. Its legal mandate, its objectives, ownership, mission, headquarters, role in economy. So this framework is for your this framework is for your Indian institutions, whereas for your international institutions, we need to know about the year in which it was incorporated, member nations, founding members, headquarters, mandate, or vision, or like whatever you want to call. See, because I think in 1 year there was a question on Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I think it was in 2021. I think there are some nuances between these two, ADB and AIIB. In your Asian Development Bank, you have Russia, US, China, India as members. Whereas in your Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, you have only China and India as members. Your US is not a member there. So there are like some small nuances. And the new development bank is something associated with your BRICS agency. And then you need to know about your World Bank, IMF, and then you need to know about the reports that are released from World Bank, and which we'll see. I think that's the last slide, which we'll see it in the subsequent slides. But if you're reading about institutions for under these perspectives, you have to like work along these lines. Sometimes they even play with headquarters. I think your Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is in Beijing, whereas your BRICS New Development Bank is in Manila. Your Asian Development Bank is in Shanghai, if I'm not wrong. You just cross check it. So they might play it with headquarters also. Next is your FDI and your FPI. FDI and FPI are like very important because every alternate year you have a question on FDI and FPI, either conceptually or just data wise, or somehow you have a question. So you need to know about the definitions of FDI and FPI. Your FPI is nothing but you invest in the financial assets of companies which are existing in some other country, whereas your FDI is nothing but you invest on a project as a whole. It's not on the assets of the company. So that's the difference between your FDI and an FPI. And under certain special conditions, your FDI can become your FPI becomes an FDI. If your FPI is more than 10% of the net worth of the company, then it will be classified as an FDI. So that you need to know. And then with respect to FDI, you need to know about the limits. You need to know about the automatic and the special automatic and the approval route. For instance, in defense, you have automatic route till 74%, and more than that, you need government's approval. Whereas in your pharma, you have 100% FDI levels with an automatic route. So those things you need to know. And then these examples of FPI, 1 year, I think, I think in 2021, there was a question on which of the following. They gave you like four options, and they gave us like four options, and they asked which of the following will be classified as an FDI. So thinking that this year you might be asked which of the following are the components of FPI, or which of the following may be classified as an FPI. So your stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, your American depository and global depository receipts, all these will be classified as an FPI. And then you need to know about the relationship between the economy as a whole and the FPI movement. Say for instance, in 2017-18, when India was like facing slight recession, we were facing recession in like 17-18, that phase. At that time, you had a phenomenon called as capital flight. You had a phenomenon called as capital flight, which means when your investors lose confidence in your economy, they just start pulling out all the money that they have invested in your FPIs. So that leads to flight of the capital from within our country to some other country. So that is called as capital flight. This term was repeatedly in news since like 2018. Those times it was there in news, but after that, since we had COVID, so this was like overshadowed by the economic slowdown due to COVID. So I think if you know along these aspects, it's good. Next is like your external sector. Like as I said, your external sector, like you'll have current account, capital account. In your current account, you have trade. So this is your trade deficit, and this is your balance of payment. And your invisibles, you have like your services, incomes, and transfer payments. And in your capital account, you have your FDI, FPI, loans, and FPI you have foreign source, Indian source. This is like something that I have included just for your understanding. So it will be better that if you remember this table, so that if at all there are any questions that are asked, we'll be able to like connect it better. Okay. Next is you need to know about. I think like very recently, what UPSC is doing is it's like asking you very conceptual questions rather than picking questions directly from current affairs. So I think 1 year. First, you need to know what is the difference between depreciation and devaluation. See, your depreciation is your local currency dropping on its value when compared to your foreign currency. Say, for instance, now if your $1 is 82 rupees, and tomorrow if your $1 becomes 83 rupees, this is depreciation, and this must be on its own purely due to the market forces. So that is your depreciation. Whereas today, if your $1 is 82 rupees, and your RBI steps in and it tells that it's going to make it 90 rupees, then the decline in value due to external intervention, that is called as devaluation. So your depreciation and devaluation will promote your exports, and your imports will be costly. You need to know this because I think in 1 year they had asked, the question was directly on this only. During depreciation, how will your imports or exports fare? And then this question was also asked, trends with rising interest rates in US federal banks. Assume that your US federal bank is increasing the interest rate. So naturally what will happen? It is incentivizing the investors who are going to come and invest in the US economy. So which means in your US economy you can invest only in dollars. So naturally what will happen? your demand for dollar will go up. If your demand for dollar goes up, your rupee demand comes down, which means what will happen? Your rupee will depreciate. So if your rupee is depreciating, naturally what will happen? You will be experiencing inflationary tendencies in your economy. So this is how you have to connect different aspects of this rising interest rates in US federal banks with the other components of the economy. And then this relation with export imports, I've told you. I think next is your appreciation and devaluation, appreciation and revaluation. Your appreciation is, suppose your $1 is today 82 rupees, and tomorrow if it becomes 81 rupees, that is appreciation. Whereas your revaluation is $1 is 82 rupees today, and tomorrow your $1 is becoming 80 rupees by external intervention. So that is your appreciation. Sorry, revaluation. And then with respect to trade competitiveness, whenever your rupee is devalued or it depreciates, your exports become more competitive. So that you need to know. And then you need to know about the exchange rates. What are like nominal exchange rates and real exchange rates? What is nominal effective exchange rate and real effective exchange rates? The nominal exchange rate doesn't account for the inflation, whereas your real exchange rate accounts for the inflation. Your effective exchange rate is, these two exchange rates are with respect to only one currency. Whereas your effective exchange rate, what will happen is your rupee is pegged against a basket of currencies. So it's like better you know what are the basket of currencies that. So you need to know about the basket of currencies that are used in determining this effective exchange rate. I think one year there was a question. I think in 2022 there was a question on your nominal effective and real effective exchange rates, and you need to know about the effect of depreciation and appreciation on your nominal effective exchange rate. When your currency depreciates, your exchange rate also comes down. When your currency appreciates, your exchange rate increases. So that is the relation there. This is your foreign trade policy 2023. And then for, I think as far as this foreign trade policy is concerned, you have to know the major provisions. Excuse me. Sorry. I think you have to know about the major provisions, and then you need to like know what are the trade facilitation initiatives that are taken under the scheme, and then it is trying to bring about export promotion via cluster development and as well as collaboration. And apart from that, you need to know about the top imports. These are the four top importing nations for India, and then India exports. These are top like four exporting nations. And then for the commodities that are imported, your petroleum, electronic goods, rice, chemicals, these form the major part of the commodities. I think these data you can find it from economic survey. If at all like you haven't followed, just follow them. And then India has trade deficit. Its trade deficit is with maximum with three countries: China, Russia, and US. And you need to know about what is this advanced authorization and duty free import authorization. Your advanced authorization is, given the commitment that you are going to export, you'll be given some tax exemptions or customs duty extensions on the exceptions on the imports. So that's your advanced authorization. So something similar is your duty free import authorization. So it's important that you like get to know about the terms that are mentioned. Next is with your free trade agreement. Recently, your bilateral investment treaty with UAE was approved by the cabinet. So free trade agreements, like every once in 2 years or 3 years, you get a question either with respect to the concept or with respect to the countries with which India has free trade agreement. So going by the trend, and also you need to know about the stages of economic integration. First, it is your preferential trade agreement, then your free trade agreement, then comes your customs union, monetary union, and then your economic union. So you need to know what are the differences between like these different stages of economic integration. And then these are the next is the list of countries with which India has a free trade agreement. It has free trade agreement with Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Thailand, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Mauritius, and UAE. These are like some of the few countries. So I think we have free trade agreement with 13 or 14 countries. So just go through them so that whenever any country comes, either you can include or exclude in the answer. So it will help you in like elimination technique. Next is your de-dollarization. This is there in news because your BRICS countries have agreed upon to promote the BRICS currency for trade between them, for trading between the BRICS countries. So de-dollarization is basically, so currently like every transaction is happening through dollars. So this de-dollarization means is it tries to like reduce the effect of or the influence of dollars in like exchange or export of exchange of commodities and the transactions between the nations. So that is your de-dollarization, and for that you can go in for like other like currencies. For instance, India was trading in rupees with Russia for getting Russian oil, um, and we have like all those initiatives are examples of de-dollarization. And one such initiative is the BRICS countries going in for this BRICS currency to trade between them. And then with respect to de-dollarization, I think you need to know something about what is called as internationalization of rupee. What is this internationalization of rupee? See, this is like trying to bring about more acceptance for rupee as an international currency among a lot of nations. So that is done through a variety of steps. Like we would have done, we would have gone for like currency swap agreement. Your currency swap agreement is like you exchange your rupees with dollars or the currencies of the countries. I think we have gone in for currency swap with Japan, currency swap with Sri Lanka, if I'm not wrong. But Japan is it's like sure we have done. So international, that's like internationalization. And then these are like some of the steps that we have taken for internationalization. So one is your currency swap, which I just said, and then you are India is like engaging into agreements with countries to settle the transactions in rupees. So like as I said, we are paying Russia for its oil in rupees, and then through masala bonds also you are promoting internationalization of rupee. See, masala bonds are nothing but these are bonds that are issued by like brokers or authorized persons abroad, and they are denominated only in rupees. So they are denominated in our local currency, they're not denominated in dollars. So I think if you like get to know about these, it's like fine. And then you need to know the difference between de-dollarization and internationalization. See, your de-dollarization is like purposefully reducing the influence of dollars, whereas your internationalization of rupees has got nothing to do with purposeful like decline in the influence of the dollars, but you promote rupee. So that's the difference between these two. And then one of the advantages with the de-dollarization is you promote your trade competition, because as of now why your dollar is like priced very high is the demand for dollar is always there. So since your demand for dollar is always there, your local currency is not able to stand up or show its full potential in front of the dollars. So if suppose you reduce the influence of dollars in the economy, naturally the demand for dollars will come down and your demand for the local currencies will increase. and that is definitely going to improve the competitiveness of currencies as well as the competitiveness of the trade between different nations. So definitely it's going to promote trade competition. Then it's going to reduce systemic risks. See, since like every transaction is based on is dollar based, just assume what will happen if your US economy fails or if your North American economy fails. If that happens, then it's going to be catastrophic for the entire world economy. So if you get in for like de-dollarization, then you're reducing the systemic risks. Then you're also keeping your debt under control. See, because your debt might be pegged in dollars, but eventually you are going to spend it in your rupee because you exchange the dollars for rupees. And if your demand for dollar is like always high, naturally your rupee will depreciate. Say for instance, when you borrowed, your $1 might have costed just 82 rupees, but when you're returning, your $1 might cost 83 rupees. So which means that that 1 rupee extra is a burden on you to repay back. So to keep your debt under control, you need to go in for de-dollarization. And then about reducing the borrowing costs, if at all your dollars influences come down, if at all your dollar influences come down, then there's like quite a good chance that your borrowing cost will also reduce because now there is almost a parity between the different economies and the different currency values. So that is like definitely there. So that's it with respect to de-dollarization. Next is your remittances. I think like I've given you the list. I've given you the list of countries which have the top remittances. Your India, Mexico, and China, the top three countries in terms of for absolute numbers for your remittances, and your Tajikistan, Tonga, and Lebanon are the countries which have large remittances in terms of percentage of their GDP. And in India, you have Maharashtra, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, the top three states with remittances. And then you need to know about what is this migration and brief development report. And then you need to know about what is this liberalized remittance scheme. Recently, RBI has like, liberalized the limits on credit card purchases for the travels abroad. So that is like liberalized remittance scheme. So you just need to like go through. And then in remittances, you have two sets of like permitted and prohibited lists. Your permitted lists are like your private visits, gifts, or donations. Your employment and studies abroad, all these are permitted, whereas gifting in foreign currency or trading in forex currency abroad are prohibited. So if you like follow, if you like read remittances along these lines, it's very good. And year on year, why I've picked up this news is like year on year, India is achieving new high in terms of the remittances that it receives. It receives over like 80 to 85 billion dollars as remittance every year. So you might expect a question. Next is your credit rating agencies. I think in 1 year they had asked question on credit rating agencies whether it said that all credit rating agencies are regulated by RBI. That statement was wrong because your credit rating agencies are regulated by your SEBI. And then these are like some of the credit rating agencies are CRISIL, CARE, and ICRA. And then you need to know about their role. Basically, they give a credibility factor or the capacity of it assesses the capacity of the borrower to repay his or her loan in the future. So that's the role. And then these rating symbols, like triple A is the safest, double A is like the next. You have A, triple B. So this is the declining. Your declining level of credit worthiness. You might expect a question from here. Next is your IMF quota is increased. Next is your IMF quota is increased. First, you need to know what a IMF quota is. It's nothing but the share of the voting rights that it's not voting rights, the capacity, like it's decided by your GDP, openness in economy, economic viability, and your international reserves. So based on this, the country's space in the IMF was decided. So that is, you call that as IMF quota. So I think you need to know what are the components that determine the IMF quota, and then you need to know about the role role of quota. It's like working voting power, resource contribution, loans, and allocation of SDR. SDR is nothing but a special drawing right. So how you vote, how resources are allocated to you, how you can like claim loans, everything is determined based on your IMF quota. So like India right now, it has like 2.75% quota, and its voting rights is like 2.63%. And then you need to know about, since this news is about IMF quota, you need to know about like IMF, the Bretton Woods Conference, the founding members, currently how many members are there, its headquarters, the reports, World Economic Output and Global Outlook, And global financial stability reports are major reports released by like IMF. What are these two statements? These two are already asked in UPSC. It might be repeated also. Just have a note. Now comes your agriculture. See, I think as far as all the sectors of economy are concerned, either like agri, industry, or service, you need to know about the gross value addition contribution of each sector, the investment that is coming in, contribution to the economy, the contribution to the economy, workforce engaged, the workforce that are engaged here, and the trends in the last 5 years. I think this was asked 1 year with respect to agriculture. Agriculture, see, usually agriculture has never reached a negative growth. Even during COVID times, it did not reach a negative growth. You had some 0.2% growth or something. And usually it maintains somewhere around like 4% growth rate. Like it's almost stagnant. And then its contribution to economy is also almost stagnant. And then you have to know like what is the food inflation, what are the reasons for food inflation, whether it is the crude oil prices or the rise, like geopolitical or geostrategic reasons. So like all those you need to know. Next comes your like minimum support price. This is there in news because you had farmers protests again this year in February. You had like farmers protesting on the borders of Delhi. I think when I had gone for my civil service interview in February, I think when I landed on Feb 13th. Feb 13th, we had farmers like protest in and around Delhi in UP. So you can expect a question. You can expect a question. So you need to know about the list of crops, kharif crops, rabi crops, or the horticultural crops for which MSP is announced. I think once that was asked in prelims, they gave a list of crops and they gave the question was for which of the following crops are MSP is announced. So that you need to know. And then you need to know about the advantage and disadvantage. I think the advantage and disadvantage aspect is more related for your mains, but now UPSC is trying to make prelims also like more statement oriented. So like you can expect a question which discusses even like the advantages and disadvantages. So you need to like do that, and then you need to know about PM Asha. PM Asha is a scheme for pulses oil seeds, and then you have three verticals or three components of PM Asha. You have like minimum support price kind of scheme there. You have price deficiency payment system there, and then you have private procurement, private pilot procurement is also there. So, and with respect to like MSP, you need to know about the Shantakumar committee recommendations. The Shantakumar committee recommendations are very, very important from mains perspective, but for prelims also you need to know that. Moving on, aquaculture. So recently, India has passed this. Parliament has passed this Coastal Aquaculture Authority Amendment Act. So first, you need to know what is aquaculture. It's nothing but like breeding of like fishes and other aquatic species So that's your aquaculture, and you need to know some data about that. India is like first in inland fisher production. Recently, it had like overtaken China. This is something very important to note. And then India is second in overall aquaculture and third in fisheries. Fisheries is like put together everything: inland aquaculture, your coastal fishing, everything put together. Sea fishing, sorry, not coastal fishing, sea fishing, everything put together. India is like third. And then you need to know about this animal husbandry infrastructure development fund. And then you need to know about, since this is something related to agriculture, aquaculture, you need to know about NABARD. NABARD's ownership, I think it's like 100% owned by Government of India. It comes under Ministry of Finance. And then the vision and mission will be there in the website. So you just make sure that you're reading through that vision and mission in the website. So that sometimes the UPSC has this habit of like giving statements which are directly available in the website. So you need to focus on that. Next is your industrial sector. You need to focus on the GDP contribution. It's like roughly between like 25 to 30%. So that you need to know. And then the investment, which investment is higher, public investment or private investment. That you need to know. And what's the component of manufacturing? Your manufacturing is like roughly 16% contribution, and then how mines is contributing. And then you need to know about what is this index of industrial production. This is asked. This is a favorite question for UPSC, and in some of your mock tests also you might have expected such questions. You have this mining, manufacturing, electricity, and then this is the order of weightage in the index of, I think these eight form the core industries, and the core industries they have a weightage of 40.27%, and it is in this order in which they have weightages given. Something that you should note. Next is your special economic zones. Recently, the special economic zone rules 2023 was notified. So it's nothing but a designated duty-free enclave that is, it is supposed to be a foreign territory for its operations, duties, and tariffs. That is your special economic zone, and you have a special economic zones act, and then you need to know who has the authority to initiate to establish a special economic zone. Your state governments can establish, or your PSUs also can establish special economic zones. And then these are some of the, this like I've picked it from internet, just to know what are the advantages or the significance or the objectives of having a special economic zone. I think if you like think or like know all these aspects, it's enough. Next is your production linked incentive. This was asked in 2022 mains, I think. 2022 mains or 23 mains, I'm not very sure, but it was asked in one of the two mains exams. So first you need to know what this PLI means. It's an incentive for incremental sales. It's not for the overall sales, it's about the incremental sales. That's very important. And these are some of the sectors. You have your medical sector, automobiles, automotives, solar, photovoltaic, textiles, food processing, pharma, drugs, textiles. So all these areas you have this PLI scheme. And then you need to know about the benefits and the limitations. See, benefit as such, it's definitely going to promote your manufacturing output. It's definitely going to bring in investments. It's going to improve your FDI. It's going to improve your um, it's going to improve the capability of the economy to produce more. It can have it has the potential to increase the share of manufacturing in the industrial sector. So all those are the benefits, and limitations are it doesn't differentiate between your domestic company and your foreign company. So when you have similar level playing field between your domestic and foreign company, your domestic company is definitely going to lose out in competition with the foreign companies. So that is one of the limitations. And then there is no proper sunset clause for this scheme. So you do not know how, why, and when you will withdraw all the benefits that you're giving to the companies or the sectors. So that is something that's not very clear now. So like all these are the limitations of this. Next is a digital public infrastructure. This term was asked in 2020 prelims because that year 2020 19 economic survey had discussed about this term. So this question was directly from the economic survey. So like if at all you have any new terms that are discussed in the economic survey, just get hold of those terms, try to understand what those terms are. If at all you're not understanding, just Google search them. Make sure that you are thorough before entering the prelims exam hall, because there's more likely, because economic survey is a government document, and it's more likely that you can expect terms that are asked in the government documents directly. So this is the definition that I've like put up. And recently you had this global digital public infrastructure repository, which works under this Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, MeitY. And then this was accepted as a part of this G20 New Delhi Declaration. So this is something very, very important. And then you just try to understand what this social impact fund is. Next, we'll go with this National Common Mobility Card. This was like recently launched by SBI for one of its SBI for its credit cards. So you need to know this what this National Common Mobility Card. It is for one nation, one card, which is used for transport mobility, and then it is developed by the collaboration between Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, National Payment Corporation of India, CDAC Center for Development and Advanced Computing, and your BEL Bharat Electronics. And then your National Common Mobility Card, it uses a near field communication, which uses magnetic field induction to recognize objects. So this is like something very important from science and technology point of view. Okay, now we have come to the fag end, I guess. Yeah, come to the last thing. See, every year at least one question on reports is asked in prelims compulsorily, either directly or indirectly. Somehow you are tested on reports. And now what UPSC is recently doing is it's like avoiding all the reports from the well-known institutions, say World Bank, IMF, World Economic Forum, but it's trying to like ask questions from reports that are released by institutions which are not majorly known. I think in 2018 prelims they had asked about justice report or something. There was a question on justice report. I'm not very sure, but it is something to do with justice or judiciary. Like I've put a few like reports because I just wanted to tell you that you have like so many different institutions. But what I will suggest is like try to take at least 4 to 5 reports of each of these institutions and try to memorize them. So like that will help you. And then see reports which are there in news, that might also like help you. And then I'll just give you some broad directions on like how you have to like revise, because this, as I said, the current affairs list that I've taken is not very exhaustive. We have like limited time, we have like space constraints also. so we cannot discuss as many as possible, but there are certain things which you cannot miss out. So one thing is your RBI report. RBI report, you need not like get into the entire report, but your RBI reports will have tables. It will have some tables and it will have discussed about fiscal deficit, inflation, debt. So all these parameters you'll have at least like 4 or 5 years data. GDP. So you'll have at least like 4 or 5 years data for all this. So you need to know that. And then second is your economic survey. Second is your economic survey. It's important that you read economic survey because it gives you the broad trends in the economy. It discusses about new concepts. Every year, new concepts come. Like 1 year there was this digital public infrastructure, and 1 year there was a question. There was a term on tallynomics, and you'll have like every year you'll have like new terms which are discussed. So it's important that you go through them. So that's it with the economic survey. RBI report, economic survey, and then you read your basic textbook. I think that like by this time you should have like done at least like 3 or 4 revisions of your basic textbook. But I would like again ask you to like refresh the concepts and keep revising the concepts which are mentioned. I think there are a few concepts which I didn't discuss here but can be asked. For instance, money multiplier, liquidity management. No, liquidity management like I discussed, but money multiplier I did not discuss. So all those things you need to like keep track of, and then you need to know at least like work on the datas. I think datas you can work on GDP, unemployment, female labor participation rate, female labor participation rate. So just try to work on datas also. I think yeah. So economy is like relatively like actually all subjects, all areas are like scoring. But the thing with economy is you are tested on basic concepts, data, trends, analysis, institutions. So if you cover basics of everything, I think out of the total like 17 to 18 questions, 15 to 18 questions that are asked in economy, sure shot you'll be able to get at least 10 to 12 right. So like that's what the is the focus of this session also. So like hope this has like helped you. I know you have to like keep revising. You just have another like 9 or 8 days for your preparation. Keep revising, solve your previous year question papers, try to revise the mock test that you have written, like keep revisiting the questions where you have made mistakes. I think that's how you like increase your chances of clearing prelims this year. So all the best. So we are done with economy, and there's one more session on history. We'll be coming up with that tomorrow. Thank you.